Sonoro presents A Murder in Montecito, a new murder mystery podcast about a best-selling author who must solve a crime off the page.
Murdered! She was definitely murdered!
Deanna must uncover the killer amongst them, but when the killer catches on, how will Deanna write her way out of this one? Sonoro presents A Murder in Montecito. A Murder in Montecito is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
I saw the dog in front of the door. I spoke to him, but he didn't come closer. His gaze was different, as if it wasn't him. And he was standing on two legs, just looking at me.
Very good evening. Welcome to the following session of Paranormal Stories. Tonight we present 3 tales that cross the boundaries of what we still want to understand as real. Of what we want to convince ourselves is the reality we can comprehend. The one that is closest to what we have always seen, as well as possible. There are stories, impossible encounters, of inexplicable presences that appear as someone we love. But what happens when we see such a figure, and it's not what it seems? I hope you're in the best mood to listen to us. And if it's not time to disconnect from everything that's out there, at least for a little while, let's forget about every worry. It's time to focus on reaching the end of the stories in this episode. Welcome to this night of ghosts, goblins, and entities that transform once more. Turn off the light, get comfortable, and let yourself be carried away by the following tales of the night. Good evening, Uriel, and all members of the Tales of the Night community. My name is Alice Alvarado. I started listening to this project since 2018 on the recommendation of what was then a school classmate. The first episode I listened to was the most terrifying story of Tales of the Night. For years I wanted to send you these 3 stories I have to tell you, but I hadn't dared due to a mostly sentimental issue, since these are stories that occurred after my father's death in 2006, and although I wasn't the protagonist of these events, my dad's death is still a painful topic for me. I was born in Nicaragua, but currently live in Costa Rica. I moved with my mom and my brother several years ago, after our life had already become very difficult. My dad was named Roberto, and we were a family of 4. Him, my mom Norma, my brother Aaron, and me. When all this occurred, we lived in Managua. I was 6 years old, and my brother barely 20 days old. My father went to Honduras for a work trip, but never returned. Some robbers killed him to steal his things. That left an immense void, a widow with a newborn baby, and a little girl who couldn't quite understand what was happening, what had occurred with her dad. This is where the first story I want to tell you begins, which happened just a few weeks after his death. At that time, in my family, the 3 of us slept together in the main bedroom. My mom let me sleep with her, and my brother slept in his crib next to the bed. My mom tells me that she was already falling asleep, when suddenly in the distance, she heard the sound of my dad's car engine, and between asleep and awake, she said to herself, "What a relief, Roberto has returned." But then she heard how the garage gate opened, how the car entered, how the door closed. She heard perfectly my father's footsteps, the sound he made when he whistled while walking through the house, ring to the emerging corridor. The initial was that he turned on the television. He always liked to watch baseball games, and then she heard how he opened the refrigerator and put something to heat in the microwave. Suddenly she heard the footsteps approaching down the hallway. The footsteps reached the bedroom door, and just when it was about to open, my mom suddenly got up, and it was at that moment that she remembered everything. She remembered that my dad was no longer alive, that nothing more couldn't be on the other side of that door, that nothing living could be outside the bedroom. She took my little brother from the crib and hugged him against her chest. She hugged me too. She tells me she started to pray, to beg God, Please don't let me see him. Don't let him enter, because if I see him, I won't be able to resist it." At that instant, everything stopped. Not a single sound was heard anymore. The second story occurred a short time later, in that same house. My Aunt Telma, an aunt of my mom's, had gone to live with us to help us. And it's that my mom was still recovering from the cesarean and was going through very strong grief. One afternoon, my aunt was washing dishes in front of the window that looked out to that beautiful garden we had with a mango tree in the center. I was still in kindergarten, and my mom had gone to sleep for a while with my little brother. My aunt enjoyed that silence so uncommon in the house those days. When she looked up toward the window and saw how my dad came out from behind the mango tree, picked up a few fruits that were lying on the ground, and then went into the room where the laundry was washed. Aunt Telma remained completely motionless for an instant, and then with a profound fear she had never felt before, she took courage and went out to the patio and started calling my dad, talking to him. Mom woke up hearing her and came closer. My aunt told her what she had seen, and together they finally went to check the laundry room. Of course, there was no one there. The third story happened to another aunt of my mom's named Leonore. One dawn, around 4 o'clock, she got up to say goodbye to her daughters because they had been invited on a trip to the beach and were about to leave. When the girls left, she stayed for a while in the kitchen drinking coffee before going back to sleep. Suddenly, she heard a car stop outside her house. She thought that maybe her daughters had forgotten something, so she quickly got up from the table to go open the door. But before opening it, she heard my dad's voice in the street, behind the door. "But no honor for me. Please let me in. It's very important for me. Please let me in." Poor Aunt Leonore fainted right there. Hours later, one of her sons found her on the floor. None of us went to my father's burial. One of his brothers took care of everything in Honduras and didn't allow us to say goodbye. Later, those same brothers took all the papers from my mom about my father's businesses, about the house where we lived. They took everything from us. My mom couldn't work because she had just given birth, and with time, we were forced to leave the house. The money ran out, and they never helped us again. They completely turned their backs on us. That's why I think that maybe my dad was still looking for a way to be, to return, to warn us, to protect us somehow. Or simply to show us that he was still there, very close to us. Thank you, Uriel, for giving us this space, for allowing us to tell our stories, however hard they may be. Very soon I'll write to you again. I still have many tales to tell, like the things that happened in my grandmother's house, which during the war was used as a torture center. And I also have a story that happened to me, one I lived after listening precisely to this podcast. Those stories will be for another occasion. Good night, community. Hello, Uriel, and hello to the entire community. I'm a great fan of the channel for a few months now since my brother showed me the podcast. I listen to it almost daily. And although there are still many chapters left to listen to, on this occasion, it's my turn to tell my experience. I would like my story to be anonymous. 2 years ago, during Easter week, I had the opportunity to go on vacation to Pachuca with my family. We also visited the nearby towns in Huasca de Ocampo. We stopped to visit the Goblin Museum. It's a very beautiful place, full of history and mysticism. On the tour, they explain what goblins are and everything about them. Also, of course, the stories of the townspeople who for years have been living with these energies. At the end of the tour, there's a souvenir shop where you find many things, but what caught my attention was a shelf that was full of figures of goblins, fairies, and trolls. In particular, each goblin figure had a characteristic written on a sheet like for love, abundance, money, etc. And after hearing the story and anecdotes from a couple of people, it seemed like a good idea to buy a figure. My parents are very skeptical, so they had no problem with me taking it. I, for my part, consider myself a believer in the paranormal, although I had never experienced anything out of the ordinary. When I went to the register to pay, the girl who served me gave me a couple of instructions before taking the figure. The goblin, by the way, I took the one that said luck, thinking that having my own luck goblin would be something interesting. But before charging me, the girl told me, "You must give it a name. You must not expose it to direct sunlight. You have to give it candy and sunflower seeds from time to time. If it plays too many pranks on you or scares you, you have to scold it like a little child who misbehaves. And most importantly, you must treat it like a family member. You and everyone who lives in your house. Because if someone has negative feelings toward it, the goblin might sense that energy and play mean pranks on that person." At first, I thought that what the girl told me was just some kind of script, that the people who work in that place tell people to maintain the magic or increase their sales in the gift shop. I had no idea that those instructions were being told to me very, very seriously. Even so, I followed the instructions without taking them too seriously, but that way was how I ended up naming my goblin, Pablito. Huasca de Ocampo was the last destination of our vacation, so that same day, we started the trip back home. I'm from a town called Cusco, Metepec de Bravo, in the high mountain zone of Veracruz. At that moment, I had no idea of everything that was about to occur when returning home. We arrived on a Sunday at dawn. The first thing I did was put Pablito on a shelf above my bed. I put a small plate where I left him a couple of candies and sunflower seeds. "Welcome to your new home, Pablito. I hope you feel comfortable here, and I hope you really help me have good luck. I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to give you candy. I just hope that, please, you don't hide my things, and most importantly, please don't scare me." Those were the words I said to him before sleeping. I had no idea that my first experience with this energy would be just the next day. It was midday. My parents had left the house, and I was getting ready to wash my clothes in a pair of sneakers I had dirty. I put on my headphones and began. I was so into the music and what I was doing, when suddenly I had that sensation. When you feel that someone is watching you with attention. When I turned around, I only managed to see a shadow that ran toward the patio. At first, I thought it had been one of my dogs, but when I looked out, I didn't see them anywhere. In my room, there's a window that faces the patio. When I looked up, I managed to see how someone closed the curtain, as if hiding. At that moment, I felt a chill and a fear that made me not want to even move. I couldn't believe that this was really happening, and even in broad daylight. Being alone in the house, I was very afraid. At that moment, I remembered what the girl from the museum told me. If he misbehaves, you must scold him like a little child. So I took off my headphones, and I don't know how it was. I don't know where I got the courage, but I started walking toward my room. My legs were shaking, but I still opened the door and stood in front of Pablito. "You don't want to be getting too funny. I told you I didn't want you scaring me around. I treat you well. I give you candy and seeds. I don't find it funny that you want to play those kinds of pranks on me." Those were the words I said, scolding him, and the truth is, it made me feel a little calmer to do it. After that, I left him another handful of sunflower seeds on his plate and a couple of candies. I left the room saying, "Behave yourself, bastard," and closed the door. After that, a couple of weeks passed until he would give me another daily scare. I would put sunflower seeds, occasionally candy or gum and water, and almost always when I went to university or went out with my friends, I would say goodbye to him, and when I returned, I would also greet him. Until on one occasion I forgot to do it. I didn't put his seeds, nor did I say goodbye to him. I just left and was out all day. That night was the worst of all. It was already dawn. I was getting ready to sleep after having been on my phone for a while, when suddenly I heard footsteps going up the stairs, footsteps I recognized as those of my dogs, although we didn't allow them to go up to the second floor door, since they got used to urinating there. After a couple of scoldings from my dad and me, they no longer dared to go up. That's why it seemed quite strange to hear them. Suddenly, the two dogs began to bark too loudly, and then in a very aggressive way. I had never heard them bark like that with so much desperation. Rather than feeling afraid, I got very annoyed since they weren't going to let me sleep, thinking that they possibly saw a cat up on the roof, or they were simply barking at the neighbor's dogs, since from that point you can see the rooftop of the house next door. I thought they weren't going to stop barking until I went out to silence them. I pulled the blanket off me. I sat on the edge of the bed, and before I could put on my shoes, someone made my dogs be quiet. With a sound so loud that it made both of them shut up and go back down to the patio very slowly, although still growling. One of my dogs is a pit bull, and the other a German shepherd. I couldn't imagine what could make them scared like that. I remained paralyzed with fear, sitting on the edge of the bed. I didn't feel like moving at all. I breathed deeply, lay back down very slowly, covered myself completely with the blanket and turned toward the wall, turning my back to my room door and to Pablito. Suddenly I began to hear how someone was playing with the door handle, as if trying to open it, followed by laughter. Laughter like a child's when he plays a prank and doesn't want to be discovered. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to even move out of fear, and I began to cry. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing. I began to pray in a very low voice, like whispering. I didn't realize at what moment I fell asleep. I thought about not telling my parents anything since they, being very skeptical, always gave me answers like, it was just a dream, or maybe it was tiredness, it was the cats on the road, or because you had too much dinner, you overloaded your stomach and that's why you had a bad dream. Those were their usual answers, but that morning my dad wasn't there. It was just my mom and me. When I sat down, she sat with me and in a very serious tone that I almost never hear her use, she told me, "Son, I didn't want to tell you anything before because I want to believe that what's happening has nothing to do with that figure you have in your room. But if it's not that, I want to ask you please to get rid of that goblin." Before I could ask why, she continued talking. "The last few nights, neither your dad nor I have been able to sleep. We only managed to rest a couple of hours before the sun comes up. But all through the dawn, we hear little laughs and footsteps in the upper part of the house and in the hallway. Your dad hardly sleeps anymore, and the few times he can, he wakes up with pain in his shoulders as if he had spent the night carrying someone. He's not going to tell you anything. You know how he is. He doesn't want to admit that he's also scared, because he can't find an explanation for what's happening. But I'm very worried about his health. You know he has blood pressure problems and not sleeping is going to affect him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mom, the person who always has an explanation for everything, accepting that something strange was happening in the house, something supernatural, and worst of all, something that was directly affecting her and my dad. At that moment, the fear I felt mixed with a lot of concern for my dad's health. I didn't know what to do. I felt powerless before the situation. It was more than obvious that my parents didn't like Pablito. Maybe because they were afraid of him, or they simply saw him as something unimportant. And maybe that's what made this energy get angry. Even my brother, who studied in Puebla, he had Pablito scare him one weekend when he came to visit. He confessed to me that when I wasn't there, he entered my room for some things. When he left the light on, confessing to me that Pablito also scares him a little. But later he got up the courage to go up and turn off the light. But before doing so, from the patio, he saw how the light coming from my window suddenly went out, even when there was no one on the second floor. In my desperation, I told my girlfriend everything that was happening. I told her I didn't know what to do with my goblin, that I didn't think it was going to go this far in that situation. But when I told her everything that was happening to me, she didn't give it much importance. She just limited herself to answering me little and spent more time looking at her phone. That bothered me a lot. I couldn't believe she was acting with such indifference to something that had me so worried. That made me not want to continue talking about the subject. It made me not want to tell someone about it again. And it's that, broadly speaking, when you look for a way to tell it, It also seems a bit absurd to me to tell that I bought a goblin, and now they make life impossible for me and my family. I got so angry with my girlfriend that I stopped talking to her for a couple of days. I didn't answer her messages or calls, until one day she came to see me. I don't know what you're going through, and if at the time I didn't give you the answer you expected, it's because I don't have it. Because I have never experienced anything like what you told me. That's happening to you. Look, I can't help you, but I found someone who can do it. I was searching in Facebook and WhatsApp groups, someone who could help you, and I think I found him. He's right here in Tepic, and this afternoon we're going to go see him. When she told me that, I felt very bad. I had pushed her away from me, without knowing that she was looking for a way to help me. I apologized to her, and later, that same day, we went to see him. Before arriving at his house, many scenarios went through my mind. I imagined a dark house with black candles and a pentagram, someone who presented himself as a witch or something similar. Yes, I imagine all the people who end up helping, the protagonists of these stories, but it wasn't like that. We arrived at a common apartment with a very normal person, only with the small detail that his house had a very strong smell, incense and herbs. He received us. We sat in his living room, and before I could say anything, he told me, "You bring with you an attached energy, and it's..." At that moment, I didn't pay attention to it. I thought that my girlfriend had already explained a little about my situation to him, but later she told me no, that he didn't know anything about what was happening to me, that she only asked for help to find someone who really knew about mysticism and esotericism, but didn't know the reason why we went to see him. I started telling him everything that had been happening to me in recent days, trying not to omit any detail, and when I finished the first phrase, this person told me really discouraged me. "Wow, I think you have a bigger problem than I thought." I really got discouraged. I told him I was already tired and that I wanted that goblin out of my house, that I was thinking about breaking it or throwing it away, anything to no longer have it with me. At that moment, he stopped me and told me it was a terrible idea. The problem was that goblins are energies, and if for some reason I broke the figure or threw it in the trash, it was going to be much worse. Since that figure is the physical form that represents that energy, and by not having it, it was going to be much more complicated for me to get rid of it. That energy was going to stay in my house, and it would be much more difficult to get it out. He told me the following: "I recommend these two options for you to get rid of this entity you have in your house. 1. Take it to a church that has 2 or more entrances at the door, which is to one side of the chapel. Leave it and tell it, 'Wait for me here. I'll be right back. Don't you dare move from this place, and leave through the other door, abandoning it there.' 2. Take it to a place like a forest, where there's a lot of nature. And tell it that now it has a new purpose, that it will be in charge of taking care of that place, like a type of guardian. But if you want to do this, you must first make all the people who live in your house say goodbye to it, and give it a final offering, candy or seeds." I saw this option as a bit more difficult, more because of my dad, because I couldn't imagine him talking to a little clay figure asking it please to leave peacefully and stop bothering us. "But be very careful," he told me. "If for some reason either of these two options you do wrong, the consequences can be worse than what you're already experiencing." When I left there, I came to my house to talk to my mom. I told her everything this person had told me, and that the best option was to take it to a forest, but that before that she and my dad had to say goodbye to it, because if they didn't do it, the situation wasn't going to change. I told her that at night I was going to leave my room door open, that they could do it when I was asleep, in case they were embarrassed for me to hear them. My mom said nothing. She just limited herself to saying, "I'm going to talk to your dad." That same night, my mom entered my room. I pretended to be asleep, but I wasn't yet. I heard how she murmured something to Pablito. She spoke to him in a low voice and then I heard how she put something on his candy plate. Approximately 10 minutes later, my dad entered, and just like my mother, I heard how he murmured something to him. Then he left some seeds on his plate. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that my dad, the person who doesn't believe in anything paranormal, was there, saying goodbye to a goblin, asking it to leave peacefully, to leave us alone. I think it was there when I understood that the consequences of having brought that goblin to my house were bigger than I thought. The next day I got up early. I put Pablito in a box, went for my girlfriend, and we bought something for breakfast. Then we went to a very well-known place here called the Dam, a very large place on the outskirts of town with many trees, a river, and a lot of nature. When we arrived, we sat down to have breakfast by the river. I felt a little calmer thinking that I was finally going to be able to sleep better and that my parents would also have one less worry. When we finished eating, my girlfriend also said goodbye to Pablito. I was the last to do it. Well, Pablito, it's time to say goodbye. Unfortunately, I can no longer have you in my house. But now, you have a more important task. Now it's your turn to be the guardian of this place, taking care of its trees, the little animals that live here, the river. Behave yourself. I really liked having you with me for a while. I hope you'll be happier. After that, just like that, suddenly strange things stopped happening in the house. Laughter and footsteps stopped being heard at dawn. My parents went back to sleeping peacefully, and I never talked about the subject again. Sometimes I happen to see in some gift shops those same figurines of goblins, fairies, and trolls, but now I see them in a very different way, with a lot of respect and even a little fear. I hope this anecdote serves to warn someone who might hear it, if it gets to be published. If you have the idea of buying one of these figures, think twice, because what I really experienced is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. It's much more complicated than it seems, and if you find one somewhere in a forest, especially here by the dam, leave it there, please. It's there for a reason. Thank you very much for reading me. Thank you for continuing here, because now we're going to a very special story, the one that closes tonight's trilogy. I'm going to remind you, as always, to subscribe if you haven't done so. It's very, very important for us, and if you've enjoyed this episode, only if you've enjoyed it, remember to share it with a friend, with someone you think might like it, or who has a story to tell us. We continue with one more tale, whose author prefers to remain anonymous. The intermission is over. My town is very beautiful. Almost all my friends have been leaving here as time goes by. They don't find it attractive to live here almost in the jungle, but I decided to stay and help in the family business. We have a small restaurant that serves both the people who come back to town after working and those lost travelers who for some reason spend a night here off the highway. Almost when we were about to close, a very large white dog arrived, big-eared. You could see the hard life on him. He had scars on his face, and you could see from how skinny he was that he hadn't eaten in days. He was fearful, but I think hunger could do more, so he came closer to ask for something to eat with his gaze. I gave him some food and water. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't thank me. He finished eating and continued on his way down the road toward town. However, in the morning, when we arrived to open, there he was, lying at the restaurant door. We noticed that he observed very carefully each person who entered. He stayed like that all day. I gave him some food, fearing that now I had a dog. I was never much for having them because I don't have time to take care of them, and I hate seeing them tied up, abandoned in houses as if they were a piece of furniture that watches. In the afternoon, when there were few customers, when only a taxi driver remained who sometimes arrived at the end of his shift, I was already thinking about closing. It hadn't been a good day. That's when a couple of young men entered. They weren't from there. You could tell they came from working because they were sweating. The white dog barked at them. He almost wouldn't let them enter, and I had to chase him away, threatening with imaginary stones. One thing to feed him, and another that he could bite someone or make me lose customers. But despite making him go away when I entered the restaurant again, he came back and stayed at the door, watching. The young men looked at the menu very nervously because of the dog. They said they didn't have enough money for anything, and that they'd better go look for something else. I asked them how much they had. I never deny food to someone hungry, but they ignored me and left, passing with much fear next to the dog. I prepared to close, and the taxi driver who was finishing his meal asked me if I had noticed what had happened. I told him no. He told me that the two boys had large kitchen knives among their clothes, that they were gripping them nervously. "They were going to rob you. They were going to rob all of us," he told me, and he realized it and pointed toward the dog. I gave him dinner, and when I prepared to go back home, the white dog got into my truck bed without asking permission. And there I understood that I already had a dog. There I decided to name him Chavo. I always loved that Mexican show, since now I know that Chavo means boy. At that time I thought it meant cool or something like that. Chavo became an important part of the restaurant routine. Every day he accompanied me to work, watched from the door, growled at few people that immediately made me distrust them. And at night, we returned home. We had a quiet life, without many worries, beyond getting enough to keep the restaurant running. Days, months, and years went by. Chavo got old. It was already hard for him to jump into the truck bed, and I had to get him a ladder. One day he left down the road where he came from. I thought he was going to come back, but he didn't. That night I waited for him for hours. I went to look for him, but couldn't find him. I spent the whole night sad and worried. I left him food and water outside the restaurant in case he came back. I knew he was going to wait for me. But when I arrived the next day, it was untouched. I kept doing it for several days, but Chavo didn't return. A week later, when I was about to close, I saw him. Chavo was sitting in front of the restaurant when I turned off the lights. I spoke to him, but he didn't come closer. I wanted to go to him, but he wouldn't let me approach. His gaze was more human, almost as if he wanted to tell me something. I got in the truck and especially toward the bed. I was glad. I drove to the house, and almost without letting me stop, he jumped down. When we arrived, he smelled everything in the garden as if it were new to him, and went into his house from there inside. He looked at me with attention. I only saw the two eyes shine in darkness. I thought I couldn't do anything else. I would take him to the vet the next day in town. That night, something woke me up first, like in a dream. I heard Chavo barking. When I opened my eyes, it sounded like someone wanted to enter the house, force the door, but it couldn't be possible. Chavo was outside. He wouldn't have allowed it. I took my knife to look out the window to see who was there, in front of the door, but looking directly toward the window where I was. Chavo was standing there on two legs, just looking at me as if waiting for me to say something. After an eternal moment, he got down on four legs and went to lie down in front of his little house. By morning, he was no longer there. I looked for him everywhere, but nothing. Again, he had left. That afternoon, the taxi driver arrived at the restaurant. It had been a while since I'd seen him. The same one who almost made me keep Chavo. He asked me about him, if I had found him. I told him no, but I didn't know how he could be aware that he had gotten lost. It had been a long time since he'd come, and it's not like I was going around telling people. He told me he knew he wasn't with me because he saw him on the road a few kilometers from there. About a week ago, he stopped to talk to him near the bridge, but Chavo didn't turn to look at him with his very tired gaze. He just went into the trees and he couldn't follow him, but he told me where he was. He also told me that he knew that look that dogs like him don't like to make their companions, their life partners, suffer. They don't like them to suffer seeing them die. He told me to go look for him, and that's what I did. I left the restaurant in my mom's care and went to the bridge. There I found Chavo lying down, like when he would settle down to rest, but the poor thing looked like he had died, at least a week ago. Probably the same day he left, I had a strange sensation of sadness and fear. A lot of sadness and a lot of fear because something that looked like Chavo, like my friend, went to the restaurant when he was already dead. He followed me home and wanted to enter. I told my mom, who said a prayer. She warned me that what arrives at night, silently, what arrives in the form of our little animals, of our friends, of our family. She told me never to trust. If they arrive at night and behave differently, if there's something that tells me they're not them. I don't know if it's a belief from here, from the jungle, or in general, to rest where he decided to do it. But I brought flower seeds that I threw over him, over his body, to see if by chance they would take root. They did. Now every time I pass by there, I can see Chavo's flowers from the bridge.
Sonoro presents A Murder in Montecito, a new murder mystery podcast about a best-selling author who must solve a crime off the page.
Murdered! She was definitely murdered!
Deanna must uncover the killer amongst them, but when the killer catches on, how will Deanna write her way out of this one? Sonoro presents A Murder in Montecito. A Murder in Montecito is available wherever you listen to podcasts.